Los deepfakes y sus graves implicaciones a la luz del derecho a la intimidad. Diego Fernández, presidente ITechLaw, Argentina. Filipe Fonteles, socio en Dannemann, Siemsen, Bigler e Ipanema, Moreira, Brasil. Paula Vargas, directora de Privacidad y Políticas Públicas para América Latina y Canadá en Meta, Argentina. Moderadora, Cecilia Abente, socia en Abente Stewart, Abogados, Paraguay.
Hola. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Gracias.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with us to share this panel with outstanding speakers. We're going to talk about deepfake and its implications on the right to privacy. I'd like to say that Filipe feels more comfortable speaking in English, so if you need simultaneous translation support, please go and get your headsets. And before starting, I'd like to share a brief message with you, a video from the president of our association, Luis Enriquez. As you may see, our president has not only improved his Portuguese, but he's also studied Japanese to welcome all of us here today. Thank you, Luis. This is not a real video. It's a video created with AI. Obviously, it was prepared with the authorization of our president. And we're going to talk about this today. We're going to talk about deepfakes, digital creations that replicate voices, gestures, and faces of people in a surprising way. As all technology, it has its good and bad sides. In terms of communication, virtual experience, efficiency, time saving, energy saving are the good things. But there are other dilemmas presented: trust, right to privacy, and issues related to human beings' fundamental rights. So I'd like to start this panel with some questions. We're going to have a discussion with our three outstanding speakers. I'm going to start with my first question. It's a question for Filipe, and then Diego will also answer. What is the real impact that these deepfakes are having today in terms of opportunities and challenges in terms of fundamental rights of people?
Gracias, Ceci.
Thank you, Ceci. Thank you, ASIPI, for having invited me. Thank you, Luis Enrique, Sofia. Thank you to the ASIPI board and the ASIPI Academia for having invited me to be here with you today.
Of Megan, I will change to English so that you can better understand me for sure. My Spanish not so good. We do have lots of challenges, and I would like to begin by emphasizing that the technology is neutral. So the technology of manipulating images in general, of course, you can use it for the good or for the bad. Technically, whenever you manipulate any kind of image or video, you would call that product as media synthesis. So deepfake would be the bad use of a media synthesis. And of course, there are several challenges. And I guess the worst challenge is to deal with how easy it is to produce material, to create material out of this media synthesis, and mostly to disseminate this material on social medias, social networks in general. So the challenge itself may not be a legal challenge in terms of characterizing the misuse, but how to combat this easy creation and easy dissemination of the material.
You?
Bueno, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. I hope you're all awake. Thank you, ASIPI, for having me. I will share some disclaimers with you. Today, I'm here on behalf of ITechLaw, and I'd like to thank ASIPI for the agreement we have with them. I'd like to thank the executive committee, and specifically, I'd like to thank Luis Enrique for supporting us and for doing his best for this agreement to keep growing and for us to keep exchanging panels in our congresses. So thank you very much. And a general disclaimer, everything I say is my personal opinion. It's not the legal firm's opinion, not my customer's opinion, since this is a topic that may be quite challenging. I'm pretty sure I will agree on many things with Filipe. It's good to see that some of us have some pieces of paper, other tablets, other phones. As Filipe said, I think that even though deepfake is not a technical term, you will not find this in the technical literature. I like the definition that says that it is realistic technology. Paula may explain this further. I think that's a better definition because deepfake has a negative connotation. When we say deepfake, we're usually thinking of a use that may be damaging, that is not authorized. So I'd like to focus on the positive use of this. Many of us will agree that deepfake is multimedia content that represents something or somebody doing something that is actually not happening. For example, the video we've just seen, it shows Luis, but this has not happened. And as I've already said, it also has many positive uses. I also think we should clarify that this will change a lot based on the jurisdiction. There are some topics we are more in agreement with, but I'm pretty sure there are other topics where we will not agree. And I mean the countries represented in ASIPI, and this is why we need a deeper analysis. And when I was preparing myself for this panel, I also analyzed other technologies because, as Filipe said, technologies are neither good nor bad. The way we use them are what may be good or bad. And I was looking for other examples, and I thought of nuclear energy, super positive in many things. Some days ago, I had to have an X-ray performed. Thanks to that, I was able to see whether I had a lesion. Radiotherapy, but there are also nuclear weapons. And it's not the first time we see positive uses of technology. Internet made us reach the knowledge all over the planet, but it also brought about deepfake, cyber crime. There are many examples. And I was also thinking of the drones, which are so trendy today and may be used for so many things. They're fundamental in agriculture, in movie making. There are also drones are used for war, and we see the same thing. The use of technology may be positive or negative. Ceci, you were asking about the impact on fundamental rights. I guess all of us will agree on this. Fundamental rights have to be respected, have to be preserved. That's where the focus is on right now. That's where the industry is working on, and regulators are also working on this. We have to see how we can protect our rights. My feeling, to open up this discussion, is that a lot will come through transparency, similarly to what happens with other technologies. Transparency is a fundamental pillar. We have to be aware of the fact that we're facing a certain technology so as to act based on this. And just like what we see in a similar field, personal data, where we carry out impact assessments, where we systematically assess the impact that something may have on people, here we will see the same thing, I believe. And actually, there are technological companies that have been testing mitigation measures regarding deepfake for 2 or 3 years to see whether transparency measures meet their goal, because companies may be required to follow certain behaviors, but then when we do a deeper analysis, we see that people would not be aware of that. So in order to be brief, I think there are lots of benefits. There are risks as well. We have to respect rights of people, but how those rights are respected, that is what will lead to the hardest discussions. Paula, thank you for being here with us. Paula has to take a flight. She has to be at the airport at 4, so I will ask the question for her to answer. From a point of view of the technological industry, which are the policy or tools you're using today to manage risks and prevent undue use? Thank you, Ceci. Thank you, Ceci. First of all, good afternoon. Thank you, ASIPI, for having me again. I love coming here. I've been the most complicated speaker in the whole event, so my apologies. But my flight is leaving earlier, so I may have to leave earlier. But thank you for inviting me. Diego was talking about visual or audio, realistic visual or audio content. And what this made us approach, we use these terms because what research shows is that people are interested in knowing whether something is real or not. Beyond the fact whether it was created with AI or no, people want to know what is real. And we use the AI provenance concept, which is the infrastructure. What is the necessary infrastructure to be able to determine whether a certain piece of content has been created or substantially modified with AI? Why do I use the term substantially? Because that's also regulatory discussion. What is the level of work that deserves this intervention? So in Meta, we have on the one hand organic content and commercial content, and on the other hand, or advertising content. And then we have content that is generated our own AI tools, and content coming from other platforms that may have been generated with AI. And those are different aspects we have to approach. We use a multi-layer approach where we have visible labels or tags, we have invisible watermarks, metadata, which are a way using industry standards, C2PA, and other standards to identify metadata. And in the case of Meta, we have our own core community standard policies. So within this matrix, the way in which we deal with organic content is the following. When that content has been generated with tools from our own platforms, then we have visible tags. That is, we add a tag or a label that you may have seen if you have ever created content with generative AI using Meta AI. Then we also have the invisible marks that are added together with the metadata to that content we do this with realistic images only, because we're talking about this context, what may lead to confusion about what's real and what's not real. Now, in terms of the content coming from other platforms, that may be images, audio, or video, what we use is invisible text. So we read and identify the tags of content that's tagged in other platforms, and also user self-declaration. That is, we generate a tool that makes it possible for the user to state that that content has been generated using AI. A key pillar is our own policies, and this is associated to an underlying topic or something that is cross-sectional to realistic content, that is misinformation. And we have to be very clear here. We have community rules that regulate what can and cannot be done on the platforms. It doesn't matter whether it's been generated with AI or not. If some content breaks our community or infringes our community rules, that content is taken down. But we have received feedback from the Oversight Board, which is an external board that works on content moderation. That was their suggestion. So the suggestion is not to focus on the AI content so much, but on dealing with misinformation. So the point is, if it infringes our community rules, that is, if it's content that promotes hate, or if it's discrimination or any kind of content should not be on our platform, it doesn't matter whether it's AI or not, that content will be subject to the misinformation policy. That's in terms of organic content. We also have advertising, and advertising may also be generated with AI. And actually, there are lots of new opportunities in the advertising market. Small companies that may not access lots of resources to generate big advertising campaigns, and today they can do it at a low cost and quite easily. We also have policies for advertising. So first of all, we have to force advertisers to say when a certain content has been prepared or substantially modified using AI. And if you receive a piece of advertising, I'm not sure whether you know, but in Instagram or in Facebook, there are those 3 points. When you get advertising, there you can see if that content has an AI component. You will see that it reads AI info or same thing in Spanish. And there, people can also learn whether that advertisement has been generated in that way. So, well, I think I've answered your question, but the focus, as I already said, should be on realistic content and on the tools that give us the necessary infrastructure for this.
Y ahora vamos un poco a ver el marco normativo.
Excellent. Now let's see the regulatory framework. Filipe and Diego, what laws or regulatory initiatives exist or are being discussed now that will regulate this topic? And if you believe that the current regulations that we have are enough, or it would be required to create a specific regulation for this?
Perfecto, Ceci. Well, Diego mentioned about the fundamental rights, the personality rights, and I guess that in any and all jurisdiction, it will be easy to qualify a deepfake as a violation of a personal right. But that's the easy part. The regulation must go deeper than that because, as we mentioned by the beginning, the greatest challenge is to combat the easy dissemination of that material in general. So yes, we do need additional regulation helping either the companies, the platforms to combat that, or the public authorities in general. In Brazil, we do have a few initiatives and laws that have already been amended to address this issue. So we could organize, in a general sense, those initiatives in two groups. First group, the amendments to existing laws, increasing the penalty that is applied whenever you use AI to commit this specific crime. Why? Because whenever you increase the penalty, it will make easier for the public authorities to prosecute the specific case and to keep the criminals in jail. Whenever you have a low-bar criminal, you could have him arrested, but most probably in 1 or 2 days he would go out of jail simply by paying a bail, right? But if you increase the penalty, then the public authorities and the judges, they would have more tools to deal with the situation. So as an example, in our criminal code, we have increased the penalty whenever you commit any kind of act against, or of violence against women in general. So we do have a specific article in our penal code that, of course, considers it a crime to do any kind of violence against women. And this penalty is increased by a half if this act of violence, for example, blackmail, for example, coercion or defamation, if this act is committed with the aid of AI, the penalty is increased by a half. Another specific example we can stem from the Child and Adolescent Act. We have also changed, we do in the Child and Adolescent Act, we do have a specific article that considers a crime for you to involve any child in a pornography act. And this article has been modified to address the deepfake issue and is also considered a crime for you to produce pornography material involving children, even if this material is totally made with the aid of artificial intelligence, which means even if the children does not participate in the act, but it is totally a deepfake, you get kind of an image of a children, and you, of course, modify this material, then turning it into pornography, that would also be considered a crime under this new amended law. And we have another group of regulations that intend to address this issue, creating new obligations and creating new tools for the public authorities. For example, our elections code has been modified in order to consider an illicit material, any deepfake that would either favor a candidate or be prejudicial to another candidate. So you probably have seen many images of candidates acting in very positive situations for the public sense in general. There was a very famous deepfake that, or synthetic material that circulated in the internet regarding Donald Trump, like providing aid in situation of catastrophes in general, and of course the material, of course not, but that material was fake. So this would be considered a illicit material under the Brazilian elections code, and this means that several tools are triggered by that, enabling public authorities to take this material out of circulation very quickly. So the Second Amendment is exactly on that sense. Whenever we are in elections period, there is a joint task force grouping public attorneys, the Brazilian Bar Association, the judicial power, and also the telecommunications agency. And this task force has the power to act very quickly to take those material out of circulation, because whenever you are under elections, 24 hours could be too much, either to tarnish or to get any gains for a politician in general. So within elections period, we do have this task force enabled and empowered to act very quickly, even with the aid of the telecommunications agency, getting this material out of circulation very quickly. And the last regulation, which is very interesting, that has been approved, that also addressed the deepfakes, was a very recent law that was passed. It's called Digital Children and Adolescent Act, which establishes a series of new obligations to platforms in relation to age verification. So for certain materials and certain types of services, the self-declaration, yes, I'm 18 years old, that's not valid anymore. You must conduct serious and effective verification on the age of the user so as to provide the services in general. And also, it is mandatory for you to make available tools for the parents to control and monitor the activities that are being conducted by their children. So these are very important measures that would help combat deepfakes, whenever those deepfakes could be conducted, even by youth in general. And also, actually, there is another interesting, let's say, new regulation, because it does not come from the law, but it comes from the jurisprudence interpreting the law. In Brazil, we do have the Internet law that was passed in 2014. And the Internet law establishes the liability and responsibility of platforms in general, Internet services in general. And by this law of 2014, the platform would be liable for an illicit material only after receiving a cease and desist letter. So this law was challenged in some class actions in Brazil, and exactly this year, in June this year, so more than 10 years, the law is from 14, so more than 10 years after the law was approved, the Supreme Court analyzed the case of whether or not that liability regime would be sufficient to deal with all the digital concerns that we have right now, like frauds and attacks to the democracy, and of course defamation and so on that stems from the deepfake. And the interpretation from our Supreme Court is that yes, the general regime is still valid, but there are some specific exceptions. Whenever this material is boosted by paid advertisement, so if the person responsible for the profile or for producing the material is paying to enhance the distribution, then the liability of the platform would be presumed unless the platform can prove that it has taken all reasonable measures to safeguard or to avoid distribution of this material. And also, there is a special regime of liability for the distribution of material that is considered serious violation of rights, such as pornography, such as material against democracy, or defamation in serious defamation against women. Regarding this specific material, then the platforms must act proactively, blocking the material to be uploaded and to be circulated. So you can see that the Brazilian authorities, not only the legislative, but also the judicial power in Brazil, they are very concerned about those new digital challenges that we are facing, and they are modulating, they are adapting the existing laws or approving new laws to provide us new tools for the combat.
Interesante, gracias Filipe. Diego.
Sí,
Interesting. I saw you were taking notes. Would you like to add something? Because you have to leave. I said we agreed with Felipe in many things, not so much in other topics, but you have a lot of regulations in Brazil, and whatever is digital in Brazil got the lead in the civil framework. Then the data protection law, quite similar to the European one, was passed. Now with AI, you're quite advanced. Going to your question, Ceci, if we need to regulate or not. I am not fully convinced that we need to regulate yet, at least. First, I would say that the use should be regulated. If it is not, there's uses we don't want and uses that we do want. So let's be careful, because there's projects going around in some of the countries represented here that, for example, prohibit any technology with the capacity to generate deepfake. Basically, if that regulation becomes a law, most of the AI tools would be forbidden, and clearly this is not the best for us. Then we can leave reality, economic reality of the region. Maybe Brazil is one of the most important and powerful countries in the region with an incredible market. The rest of the countries, Brazil also, we need investment and development and regulation without any kind of policies of state, thinking what each country would like to be, exporting technology, consumers. I believe this also has an impact, and eventually any regulation should take into account innovation, development, evidently respect to rights. But we want to have more companies that are innovating. Then, Ceci, what you also said, there are tools available already. In penal law, we have typification, and maybe some of these things are not typified, so there's not just one road. But everything related to civil law, there's a lot of consumption-related, transparency, right to consumption. This has to do with many issues, right to image, data protection, or personal data protection. All that exists already. If we had created deepfake of Luis before, and if I have humiliated them, or I have left him as a bad lawyer, Luis could resort to justice and ask for damage protection or damage financing. There are other panels that refer to the testing on internet. Many times it's hard to prove who did what. And similar to whatever happens, sometimes either in the street, there are some signs affecting a certain candidate. We know who will be benefited, but we don't know who generated it or who created it. There's many videos on internet that will affect someone, but we don't know who did it. And this is a topic. Regarding Argentina, we have a general framework where we can resort to that. We have IP, civil and commercial codes, data protection law. We have all the system and the damage packages on the civil code. So there are many tools we can resort to. And I think it is necessary, it's interesting to highlight two things. One, compared law. One is Europe. Probably many of you heard that there's a regulation on AI, quite well known, and this was applied in stages. There are some stages to be implemented yet. There's a special article that forces to be transparent and to do what Paula said, to have labeled certain contents that are generated by means of AI. But my comment was aiming more at there's some trends in the region to use European models and to pass similar legislations, thinking that that is the best legislation. What is happening now is that a few weeks ago, Europe submitted something that is called omnibus, or a big umbrella law, and they realized that the law had a goal. The goal is not being met or achieved. There's a lot of innovation that is not available in Europe. Many technological companies decided that their AI models are not to be available, and this brings about many problems for users and industry. And now they are coming to simplify, to try to certain barriers or points that generated friction to have some flexibility. So I think that is important. The countries that we are looking at this, the ones that regulate first, they are trying to think about what they regulated. I think we have to be really very careful with this. And on the other hand, US is there, that follows the path of what Filipe said in the state part. They have criminalized of the deep fakes as to porno revenge porn, that is using these videos to affect your former couple or your couple. And there's a federal law that is not fully operational yet, but on the one hand, this criminalizes deepfakes use, which is operational, and on the other hand, they're thinking about an obligation or system related to notice and takedown or measure in other panels, so that removing these videos is a faster activity. If they are not removed, they will generate huge damage. I don't know if I have answered your question. I'm not fully convinced that it has to be regulated, but we have to think of what Paula said. What is the best way for users to realize that they are facing this type of content so that they can decide what they want to do as to that? But it's hard for me to see a regulation of technology as such, because it will affect many positive uses. Thank you, Diego. Very interesting. Paula, would you like to add something?
Ahora nunca. It's now or never. In connection with what Filipe and Diego said, we're now seeing in regulatory proposals about AI and data protection these transparency requirements and automated decisions in the case of data protection acts or AI acts. There are full chapters about provenance. How can we generate the infrastructure that will make it possible for people to know when they are interacting with AI? Now, there are some limits to this. Provenance tools have some limits, and this has to be well identified in regulations, especially when regulations tend to create static obligations in a dynamic topic. For example, which are some of the restrictions? The robustness of these measures. These measures may be infringed as well. So we have to consider that it may be a visible watermark, may be created to be removed. The more transparency we have about this system, the more the opportunities for malicious players. So the robustness of the infrastructure has some limits. Then the standard, the industry standards, for example, many technological companies have signed a framework on synthetic media, but this is only one part of the players who generate these types of content. So there is no generic industry standard. And there is another limit there, because as I've already said, the content comes from another platform. I have to be able to identify that, and to do this, I require a certain standard. So there are some limits, and the regulation should consider this. It should consider what is possible and what is not. And to conclude, you wanted to ask me a question about the future. If we consider a provenance ecosystem, some characteristics it should have are flexibility, because if it's too rigid, too static, it will not achieve the desired impact, should be interoperable. It should make it possible to iterate because this is dynamic. It's continuously changing. There are new technologies affecting this realistic content. And it should also involve all players. The opinion of the industry is very important because there's a lot of technical knowledge in the industry, civil organizations, regulators, so there should be a dialogue to generate this provenance ecosystem with multiple players. Apologies for not being able to stay longer. I will have to leave now. Thank you, Paula. Safe travels. I wanted to add something. Paula was saying something that I think is very interesting. The government should define what they want. The government should say, I want to achieve this goal, and considering the flexibility mentioned by Paula, I think that the companies should bring to Congress, to regulators, the solution they think might help us reach that goal. Very frequently, what happens is that they create a solution that cannot be implemented by the industry. We want the public, the audience, to know that they are facing a deep fake. Paula was mentioning the standards agreed on by several companies. Eventually, regulators will accept it or not, but I think that's a good dynamic. Today, what we have today may have changed completely in 5 years' time. Final question, cases. What cases, examples have you seen, and how is the judiciary facing this? Well, I don't want to be the only one speaking, but I think that we're all familiar with the most negative cases. Those are the ones who reach the media. But there are also many positive cases, and I tried to find some to see what deepfake can contribute to, even though deepfake always brings about a negative connotation. Everything I'm going to mention is something that's already happening. Making actors look younger. Many movies require a famous actor playing a role 20 years earlier or later. Today, this is much easier. We can discuss whether this will be possible for the industry or not, but some projects that may not happen due to cost reasons, because there are many movie makers who may not have a large budget. Well, these technologies, they will be able to make these movies. Despite Tom Cruise, the digital characters can be used for risk, for stunts. Short time ago, there was a meeting with a lawyer who specializes on this. He was a lawyer from Hollywood, and it's amazing how this is used in the American movie industry for stunts, for dubbing the same scene. He mentioned some scenes that had already been filmed, but the director was not happy with the dialogue, so they had to redo the scene, and that meant lots of money. With this technology, they can change things and have the lips of the actors moving as they want. He also mentions multiple receptors. I remember some movies I watched with my children where brothers and sisters were separated at birth, where they're using this to shoot the same kind of movies with the same actor without having to film so many scenes. Those of you who did not enjoy history so much in school, having studied history with a representation of some of the history figures, well, may have been much more interesting. It's being used a lot in the health industry so as not to expose patients and their privacy. It's being used a lot for accessibility, for sign language. Many avatars are recreating well-known people. And there are other more complex issues, complex from an ethical point of view. I'm sure we all agree on some principles, but there are some things that may be accepted here and may not be accepted elsewhere. It's used to relive files of relatives who have passed away, and people can talk to their father, mother, or brothers or sisters through these techniques. This may be good for some. Others may think that it's crazy, but this is being done. And preserving visual and audio identity, the voice and image of people who have passed away are also being recreated. And Filipe, you can add something about the Brazilian examples. Those of you in Argentina may remember that during the latest political campaign, we also saw some video. There was one about former President Macri saying close to the end of the election period that a candidate of the official party was being taken down. And these things are more challenging because they affect democracy. We know these things have also happened in the U.S. There was another video of the current governor of the province of Buenos Aires. They took an interview from a TV channel, and they changed part of what he said using this technology for him to say that he had nothing to offer, no plans for the future. Some may have believed that was true, others may not have believed it, but I think this affects democracy a lot. It's quite damaging for democracy. So I will stick to the positive uses. If we were to ban these technologies without considering the more specific uses, we would be missing lots of things that are not usually mentioned on the media.
Diego mentioned the large use of artificial intelligence for manipulating images by the film industry. That is true. I can mention those specific cases that became very famous. One of them was the film Fast and Furious 7. The Australian actor Paul Walker, right? Paul Walker, he unfortunately, he died during, the stages while they were making the film, so they had to finish it using AI tools. And another example, very famous one, is regarding the actress Carrie Fisher for the Star Wars. Yes, the Carrie Fisher is Princess Leia. So they did, after she was dead, they used artificial intelligence also to have some scenes where Princess Leia would appear in specific episodes. I don't remember the specific episodes. But we also have some unfortunate negative uses and examples that I can mention from the Brazilian experience, the Brazilian perspective. Regarding fraud, there was a large case in Brazil where a deepfake using the image of the famous top model Gisele Bündchen was used to promote a specific website, e-commerce website. So she would, in social medias in general, she would promote cosmetics and beauty products in general. Say, oh, this cosmetic is very good, I use it. Oh, look at this new shirt or whatever. So you would go to that e-commerce website and it was all fake. You would purchase the product and you would never receive it. It was totally fake, the website, the e-commerce website itself. And it took, weeks and weeks before they could, take these videos of Gisele Bündchen out of circulation, and then they produced some other videos using some other top models and some other, Brazilian influencers for committing the same fraud. In terms of pornography and defamation, I can also mention another case, a very sad case, which brings an alert to all of us who are parents. It was a Catholic, very traditional school in Rio de Janeiro, actually, where I live. A Catholic, very traditional school. A teenager who was 14 years old, got pictures from parties where they would, parties like birthday parties of their colleagues, and some female colleagues. He would use AI to produce pornography of their schoolmates. So can you imagine the harm, the huge harm that would be caused to a girl, teenager girl, like 14 years old, when all the colleagues would see her, in pornographic acts in general. Even if though that material is classified as fake afterwards, for a teenager, that's unbearable, of course. And this explains a little bit the concern of the Brazilian regulators, why they have passed this Digital Children and Adolescent Act in order to control the access to this type of tools by adolescents in general. And also we have an example for the elections in Brazil. When we had the pandemic, there was a huge discussion on whether or not the vaccines were necessary, and some politicians in Brazil, they supported that a chemical ingredient called chloroquina, I don't know how to say it.
Argentina.
Well, yeah, something like that. But chloroquina was, one of the chemical ingredients. They said, well, if you take chloroquina, you are good. You don't need vaccine. You'll be immune to the pandemic, so no problem at all, to the virus. So they produced the supporters. Allegedly, the politicians that were supporting this position, they had no involvement in this deepfake, but their supporters, they produced a deepfake using the images of a very famous doctor in Brazil. Varela is a very famous doctor, Drauzio Varela, that is always appearing in TV shows and so on. So they produced this deepfake of Drauzio Varela supporting the use of chloroquina, and of course indirectly supporting the opinion of those politicians in a period that was very controversial in terms of politics in Brazil. So we do have several examples. The majority of them are criminal cases that do not reach the press, but those are examples that we can mention, very recent examples.
Genial, gracias. Con eso damos.
Great, thank you. We'll now close our discussion. Are there any questions from the audience? Please try to be brief because we have very little time.
Abri.
Fabri, also, I asked you to answer briefly. Excellent presentations. My question goes to both of you. As of today, what do you think is the best way to fight deepfakes? Civil liability, penal crimes, or a specification on AI, according to each country also? Hello, thank you, Fabricio. As I said before, I'm not sure I have had a specific regulation. I think there are tools, especially in the civil part, there are quite several tools. And I believe apart from fighting it from the civil point of view. We need to make main effort as to all the transparency, as to the use of AI to especially prevent. I think having an action is okay, but many times turning things back to the previous state or condition will not be exactly. If we could everything related to material things, I believe it will be much richer. The road was quite proper, in my opinion.
Of deepfake you are talking about, but in general, I would suggest you to act both with the platform making a notice and take down, asking them to, not to disseminate this material anymore, and also to pursue a criminal action. Criminal actions for this type of criminal activity tends to be faster in order to obtain a judicial order, also helping the platform to take this material out of circulation. So I would do both, notice and take down to the platform, and also a criminal action.
Excelente. ¿Alguna más?
Excellent. Any other? There. Very last question. And then we continue during the coffee break. It was very interesting. I am Malena. We are talking a lot about the negative aspects of deepfakes, continuing this negative connotation of the word. But I see it also has a positive face. We can use it as a monetization tool, especially for entertainment and artists. And maybe a regulation, this goes more to you, Diego, we share the same country. Regulation could also open up the doors to that, because today image rights is a very personal right. Monetizing it has its complications beyond enforcement. That's what we're discussing here. So regulations, some guidelines could open that door and give some room to the segmentation of imaging as personal right. But this also gives right to future data and heirs, licensees. I don't know if you have read about that, if there's any project that will foresee this. Thank you, Malena. You have killed me. I have forced on all the positive things, and you said we spoke about negative things. I did not meet my goal. I did not fulfill my goal. No, it was a joke. I have not heard any projects about what you're presenting. I think it's perfect. And I believe that maybe with this technology, we are opening up some doors, as you said, for the audiovisual business become richer and to have other business opportunities, licensing, etc. That I believe it's okay, as long as there's no public order that is fully committed. The author or the right holder, we have the possibility to do that, but I don't know specifically projects that go in line with that.
I agree. I guess we have mentioned during the presentation that there are several positive uses of this image manipulation. And I think that a very rigid regulation could stifle the innovation and those positive uses. So I'm not totally in favor of rigid regulations. I guess that those general regulations that we have, especially regarding elections and the criminal code, they are more than enough to provide us tools for combating the deepfakes in general. So when it comes to practice, whether or not the administrative and technical measures that should be taken by the platform, social media companies, and so on, I am much more in favor of self-regulation. So I wouldn't pass very rigid laws exactly in order not to stifle innovation.
Excelente. Gracias, Filipe. Gracias, Diego, otra vez.
Excellent. Thank you, and Felipe, thank you for your participation. We have a coffee break and next panel. Thank you.